Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today is September 28th, and before we get talking about the material, there's just a few topics we need to discuss real quick. First and foremost, I want to remind everybody again, we will be having exam one next week, okay? So that is a traditional test. You show up and take it in class, on paper. We all know how that works, okay? It is all the material up to here. It is effectively a midterm exam. If you are quarantined because of COVID and you can't come here, get in touch with me so we can arrange proctor arrangements. Okay, I guess I'm talking to the people at home on this one. But the way I'm setting it up, because of this semester being a little unusual, the exam is on Monday or Wednesday. Okay, so you can show up Monday to take it. If you don't feel like taking it on Monday, you can take it on Wednesday. Okay, that's how I'm setting it up. Does everybody understand? Okay, so Monday or Wednesday next week, there is a study guide in the modules. Who in here has already seen the study guide? A few of you? Okay, yeah. That's just a whole bunch of terms, and if you know those terms, then you're on track to being prepared. That's what those terms are. And I have to remind everybody, not all of the material is what we have talked about in class. There's quite a bit of material in the modules that we did not cover, like Rome. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the idea that I didn't lecture on Rome, but we're going to be testing on it. But it is in the modules. So please be sure to check it out, okay, and be ready for next week. Secondly, and I'll go over the exam format on Wednesday, but y'all know how to take tests, okay? There's a fill in the blank, there's some short answer, there's an essay question. We all know how to do that because we've all been tested before. Okay, secondly, there is some extra credit that I'm going to be offering. I do this every semester with all of my classes. There's movies that you can watch. And if you are willing to sit down, watch what I consider to be a really good movie, I'm giving you extra credit just for doing that, okay? Now, I'm very open-minded in terms of what movies these are. Sometimes students recommend them, and I think it's a great idea. And these are not necessarily World Civ I related movies. They're sometimes related to other eras of history, because let's face it, history doesn't really have a World Civ I and a World Civ II and a US I and a US II. It's all human history, right? And also, a lot of times, these are based on critical thinking. The whole point of the movie is to get you to just think about the various value systems that humans govern themselves with. And so I consider that to be important too. So the first movie that you are allowed to watch for extra credit is not a World Civ I movie at all, but it's a great movie that opens up the idea of critical thinking. And that is a movie that came out about 25 years ago. It's called Quiz Show. Okay, it's called Quiz Show. It's about a game show in the 1950s that was a little bit less than honest. And so if you want to watch that movie, I will give you extra credit. Here's how that works, okay? You have to watch the movie from beginning to end. You have to watch the real movie the right way, meaning you can't just watch a whole bunch of clips on YouTube or some sort of hacked together version, right? I don't think this movie is directly available on Netflix. I try to find Netflix movies, but I think they pulled this one from Netflix. So you will have to rent it or find it through one of the other services. Maybe you'll pay $3, maybe you'll pay $5, something like that. But movies aren't particularly expensive to do that. So sit down, watch Quiz Show from beginning to end, no distractions of any kind, right? Your phone's off, no other homework, no kids running around. Y'all get the idea, right? Just you, the movie, and a bag of popcorn. Watch it from beginning to end, and then when you're finished, talk to me, okay? And we'll have a conversation about the movie and explore some of the topics that the movie covers. If you are watching at home, what I want you to do is contact me first before you decide to watch the movie. I want to talk to you before you do it, okay? The rules are the same for everyone, but I want to know who at home is actually going to do that. So everyone's cool on that. Easy way to earn extra credit. Watch a good movie. There we go. There's going to be another movie later on. The second movie, and this was all decided in the other World Civ I class, is going to be There Will Be Blood, which is another really interesting movie that explores the topic of what's right, what's wrong, what really is the guiding force behind human nature. It's a great movie, and there definitely will be blood. That's part of the deal. Great movie for the little kids, in case you're wondering. Have the kids in the room for that one. It'll be a great experience for them. And again, I don't care if you watch that one actually, but get in touch with me first if you're not in the room right now. And there we go. So, are there any questions on that? Anything that we need to cover there? Okay, then let's get going. When we left off last time, we were talking about, if I recall, Charles Martel, who was the Stuart in the Merovingian dynasty, and he defeated an Islamic invasion at the Battle of Tours. He defeated an Islamic invasion, driving the Muslims out and securing the kingdom of the Franks, thus making him a hero of sorts, and certainly the most powerful man in the kingdom, despite the fact that he wasn't the king. We talked about that, right? Well, he has a son named Pepin. I think we mentioned Pepin too, right? Pepin is interested in becoming king. Pepin wants to be the king. His dad probably could have been king if he really wanted to, and so Pepin decides that he's going to. Pepin realizes that he needs to have the authority to do this. He needs to have the agency behind him, and the Pope is the man that can make this happen. So Pepin turns to the Pope, and he asks the Pope if the Pope will decide that God wants him to be king, and the Pope wants something in return. The Pope isn't going to do something like this for free. The Pope obviously has his own request. And in this case, the Pope was surrounded. The land that he lived on, well, he was surrounded by a group of people known as the Lombards. And the Lombards are not his friend. They are his adversaries. They are allies of the Byzantine emperor in the east, which is a threat to the Pope. And so the Pope wants Pepin to use his powerful army to take care of the Lombards for him. And so it was a situation that we see time and again. If you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And that's exactly what happened. Pepin went in, he crushed the Lombards, took him a couple of tries. And in return for this, the Pope made Pepin the king of the Franks. And so the Merovingian dynasty ends and the Carolingian dynasty begins. Now, this once again emphasizes that close alliance between the king and the Pope. And in this case, it's the king of the Franks. But we will see this type of alliance emerge all across Western Europe. The king uses his enormous power to make sure that everybody is a loyal Christian following the Pope's leadership, and the Pope uses his tremendous authority to make sure that God wants you to be king, him to be king. And this arrangement will go on for just generations. Now, Pepin did one more thing. He gave the Lombards land to the Pope. He actually, that green area there, he gave it to the Pope to govern directly. And this became known as the donation of Pepin. Later to simply be called the Papal States, the Pope's states, the Pope's land. And so the Pope now is more than just a spiritual leader. The Pope is a bona fide ruler. And a nation, if you will, is created in northern Italy, directly ruled by the church, meaning that popes need to be more than just spiritual leaders. Popes have to be kings. They have to have armies. They have to collect taxes. They have to engage in foreign affairs, et cetera, et cetera. And this shapes the development of the church over several generations. And the Papal States did not actually go away until 1871, when Italy was unified. This is going to remain an independent country really up until the modern era. And after Italy was unified into a single state, the Vatican still claimed to be the Papal States. And so if you go to the Vatican today, which is sort of that little area, that little enclave within Rome, you are actually in a separate country. You are no longer in Italy. You are in the Papal States, or what they call Vatican City. And it all gets back down to the donation of Pepin. Moving forward, Pepin will have a son who also then takes the throne, the second of the Carolingian kings. And I am going somewhere with this. If you're wondering why I'm going into such detail, it's important. Pepin's son will be named Charles, and he is very capable, very talented, very powerful as a king. He is a big, strong man with a big, strong personality. He will be so influential that when he dies, he will be called Charles the Great, which in Latin is Charlemagne. And so that is his name. He is Charlemagne, Charles the Great. What really makes him significant is that he is the first of these Germanic kings to really understand that Western Europe lost something when Rome collapsed. That hundreds of years ago, and that's what we're talking about now, things were better. He sees the old bridges and crumbling aqueducts and, recognizes that those were pretty neat. And this enabled people to live better. He sees the statues and the monuments that are now, of course, fallen over and broken. And he realizes this represents a society that was in many ways better than what we have now. He understands that people back then were more literate. He understands that the world that these people lived in was more stable, more prosperous, just better in all the ways that you would want a society to be. And he decides that he wants to rebuild that. He wants to bring back the stability that had been lost when Western Rome fell. These other Germanic kings that had come before him never thought about that stuff. That was not important to them. Again, the Romans saw them as barbarians, but they just had a very different worldview of what it meant to be a leader. They are powerful, strong warriors and whatever, but the greatness that had been Rome had not really been relevant to them. But to Charlemagne, he realizes maybe we should have kept that going. He is probably the first leader from the early Middle Ages to actually care about the ordinary people. Your average peasant, your average dirt farmer, up to that point had been basically irrelevant to these leaders, but he wants them to be happy. He wants them to live a good life. He understands that being a king, or an emperor in his case, later on, means you have that responsibility. So he is not just stronger and wealthier and more powerful, but he is more intellectually sophisticated than what had come before. He is dropping that sort of German tribal identity and adopting one that is more modern, more updated. Charlemagne is going to dramatically grow the borders of his kingdom. The light green there is what he inherited after a little bit of squabble. The dark green is what is under his rule when he dies. And so we're looking at about a 40% increase. And if you look at it, it kind of appears that Western Rome is being put back together. This is the closest we have to a unified Europe since the fall of Western Rome. It wouldn't take too much more to have borders that were very similar to what would have been before the fall of the empire. And this notion was not lost at the time. In the year 800, the Pope crowned Charlemagne Roman emperor. And this is a title that had been abandoned in the West for generations. Now, why the Pope did this, who really knows? The fact that the Pope would consider himself being authorized to grant that title is a statement in and of itself. It's possible, it's actually assumed, that Charlemagne didn't want that title. He didn't want to be called Roman Emperor. Because you see, the Byzantine Emperor is the Roman Emperor. The Byzantine Empire hasn't collapsed. And this is only going to cause conflict as far as that goes. He's assuming a title that another man actually has legitimately, which, Charlemagne probably didn't think too wise, but that's what happened anyway. Charlemagne divided his empire into 250 roughly equal districts and appointed a governor of each one that answered directly to him. Again, not unlike the way Rome had been structured. Rome had its various provinces, and the governors of those provinces answered to the emperor. And of course, all roads led to that capital city. And Charlemagne is trying to set something up similar to that. And these governors were not chosen simply because they were big, powerful chieftains. He chose them for their leadership capability on an administrative level. Can these guys actually govern? Yeah, sure, they're powerful warriors and they're big and hairy and smelly, and that's what we big German men are supposed to be, but are they actually good leaders? And so it's a different set of standards that in his mind will modernize. Charlemagne is going to be very concerned about the loss of literacy. He understands, there was a time back when Rome was doing its thing that literacy was high, and having a highly literate society is good. There's a lot of reasons why a highly literate society can become more prosperous and stable. And all of those 250 governors had to be literate. And he demanded that literacy now be a thing. And you better believe these big Germanic warriors did not want to do it. Literacy is for the weak, the girly men, the nerdy kind of stuff. We big, powerful warriors, well, we don't mess with that. It's kind of like telling the football team that they've all got to learn how to code, right? Yeah, that's a bunch of nerd stuff. We big athletes don't mess with that stuff. Well, yeah, you're gonna. That's what you're gonna do if you're gonna keep your position. That was what Charlemagne did. He hired a man by the name of Alcuin. To establish a school for these men to learn at. And you can only imagine what it would have been like for him to try to teach these guys. And Alcuin actually modified the script. He modified the way the alphabet is written to make it more conversational, to make it easier to learn to read and write. He introduced uppercase and lowercase. He put punctuation in there. He put periods at the end of sentences. You can see it here if you look closely. And that was to make it easier to learn, to make it more like the way people actually speak. We use the same alphabet as the Romans, and I know this looks kind of foreign, but those letters, if you look at it, they are letters we would be familiar with. But the Romans didn't have any punctuation. The Romans didn't have an uppercase or a lowercase. And Alcuin decided that we needed to change that. So if you want to know why there's so many weird grammatical rules in English, you know who to blame. And I am making this very simplified. There are others that influence the development of modern language as well, or at least written language. And we're a long way away from English, in case you're wondering. They're not speaking English, and they won't for a few hundred more years. But we've got to figure out a way to get these guys literate. That was his task. When Charlemagne dies, again, we can see why he was considered Charles the Great. A new era has emerged that historians call the Carolingian Renaissance. And it's possible we might just pull ourselves out of the Dark Ages. With the right leadership, another few generations, we might actually see things improve or not. And by the way, Charlemagne himself was never literate. He never learned to read and write himself, although he did try. The writings that exist indicate that he put real effort into it, but he could never seem to figure out what the letters are. And the descriptions indicate he might have been dyslexic. That might have been the problem, although they wouldn't have known that at the time. Well, Charlemagne had a son, Louis the Pious. You can see him. That's a word find, I guess, right? One of those things you see in the back of the paper. Now, if somebody is pious, what are they? What is piety? Anybody know? Religious. He was a deeply devout Christian. He's not called Louis the Great, like his dad, Charles the Great. He's Louis the Pious. And the best way to think about Louis the Pious is that he was okay. He was not the powerful man that his father had been, but he wasn't incompetent either. We're not finished, of course. Louis is going to have 3 sons. 4 actually, but 1 died. We have Louis the German, Charles the Bald, and Lothair. And they had different mothers. 2 had one and 1 had the other. And as you can probably guess, they did not agree over who gets to be the next king. They fought over it. And when you start fighting over these things, you give away power, you give away wealth, you give away land. I need this powerful man with a big army to support me, so I'm going to make him promises that whittle away my own authority. And for years, that's what they did. For years, that's what they did. And none of them was able to win. They were all kind of at a stalemate here. They fought and they fought and they squabbled. And what that means is that central power that had been built by Charlemagne dissolves. That central power that had been built that was so instrumental in getting us this far, well, it went away. Finally, when it became obvious that nobody was going to become the next king, in 843, they signed the Treaty of Verdun. And Verdun is a city that's kind of in the middle of all of it. Today it's best known for the very unpleasant World War I battle that was fought there, but under the Treaty of Verdun, they just split it up. Louis the German gets roughly what is Germany. Charles the Bald gets roughly what is France. And Lothair got northern Italy and some land in the middle. Lothair also gets to have the big title, the Roman emperor title that Charlemagne had been given. Well, that goes to Lothair. And it doesn't really mean much beyond that, but there you go. Now, Lothair's land will eventually get divided in the north, as you can see there. Another treaty would come along later to divide some of his northern land. So from this, we get roughly what will become Germany, roughly what will become France, and then North Italy. And over many generations, these different regions evolve unique cultures and eventually unique countries. And the French become French, and the Germans become German, and the Italians become Italian, whatever Italian may actually be. I'm not even sure the Italians have figured that one out yet, but they try. Now, why am I getting into this? Why is this so important? Well, this is now laying the foundation for modern Europe. It's laying the foundation for a European map that exists to this day. There will be cultural differences. There will be political differences as well. Not right away, over the course of many generations, France will become a centralized state. It will become a single country with a single government, but Germany and Italy don't. Germany and Italy remain fragmented. A whole series of little countries ruled by kings and dukes and who knows who will come to define the German and Italian regions. So France becomes unified, but Germany and Italy don't. Germany and Italy don't unify again until the modern era. I mentioned Italy actually both unify in 1871. One of the key differences between Germany and France is, of course, language. Y'all know that, right? They speak different languages. What's that all about? Well, you will recall that in European Rome, Latin was the language. That was the language of the ordinary people. And so in those regions, as we move through the Middle Ages, the people are going to develop a language based on Latin. And we call these Romance languages. They'll call them Romance because of Romeo and Juliet. We call them Romance because they're based on Rome. What are some examples of Romance languages, Latin-based languages besides French? I'm sorry, a little louder? Spanish, yeah, absolutely. Spanish is a Latin-based language. What else? Well, Italian, right? We know that, right? The closest modern language to Latin today is spoken in Sicily. The very southern part of Italy today speaks a dialect of Italian that we think is the closest to what Latin would be, but even it's pretty different. Portuguese, Catalan, even Hungarian, these are Latin-based languages. If you can speak one well, if you're fluent, learning another isn't all that difficult. The words are very similar, the sentence structure is very similar, the way they conjugate the verbs, and to be honest with you, Latin-based languages really aren't that hard to learn. Even as speakers who don't speak any of them, they're just relatively simple as languages go. Now, I'm sure plenty of y'all in French and Spanish class might disagree, but that is the truth. Now, German is very different from Latin. It is a radically different language. What are some of the Germanic-based languages? Obviously, we know German is, but they're also going to spread in Europe, but generally not where Rome was. What are some German-based languages? Well, I'll give you a hint. You're listening to it right now. English, yeah. English is a Germanic language. Now, there's a lot of Latin in English. And so English is kind of a fusion between the two, right? Norwegian is a German-based language. Dutch is a German-based language. So basically Scandinavia as well. What happened with English is the Romans were in England for a while, and then the Germans migrated there, and it just all turned into a big gumbo of words out of which English is going to evolve. Now, why do I really want to emphasize that? Well, there's some things that we need to understand when it comes to our language. And the first point you need to know is that it is ridiculously difficult to learn if you are not a native speaker. Okay, because it really is kind of a fusion of Latin and German, which themselves are structured very differently. Honestly, we have all kinds of rules in terms of how our sentences are structured and how the verbs are conjugated, etc. And there are more exceptions to those rules than there are, rules that actually follow. The language relies tremendously on context. Our language has all kinds of words that sound exactly the same and are the exact same word but have entirely different meanings. Right? We know that, right? We've got lots of words that just, why on earth, right? Do I, start a letter, dear Joe, right? But a deer is also the animal that's crossing the road that I don't want to hit with my car, right? There's countless words in the English language that make no sense in those ways. And so when you meet somebody who is not a native English speaker, when you meet somebody who has learned it as a second language, particularly someone who is not European, you are instructed to be very sympathetic, okay? Understand that just being able to have a simple conversation with you in English represents a tremendous amount of effort on their part. Are we following me? Now, let's take this one step further. English is very rapidly becoming a global language. It has been for well over 100 years now because of the British Empire and the fact that the United States is now such an influential country. Of all the languages in the world, English is the one that is probably most important to know. But, as I hope you also know, there are many, many, many different accents and dialects of the English language. There isn't just one English that everybody speaks. Y'all know that, right? What is standard English? If I were to say you need to speak standard English, what am I saying? What do I mean by that? It's kind of self-explanatory. Okay, standard English is the English language where you do your best to remove the accent, remove the slang, pronounce your words properly, use proper grammar. You get where I'm coming from, right? If you want to hear a good example of standard English, turn on the nightly news and listen to the broadcaster, right? They're speaking a very vanilla, generic version of English that everybody can pick up on, right? I mean, you don't turn on the nightly news and hear somebody talking like they're from Mississippi, right? You know, in the world today, the United Nations passed this bill and Donald Trump said something about his hair. I mean, y'all don't hear the broadcaster talking like that, do you? Now understand, whoever that broadcaster is does have a regional accent. They came from somewhere. But what they've done is they've erased that to speak standard English. You get where I'm coming from now, right? Well, as you enter the professional world, and you go on things like job interviews, and you interact with people like customers, what you need to be able to do is code shift between Mississippi English and standard English, right? You have to be able to understand when you need to speak one way and when you need to speak the other, because the way you present yourself is going to have a real impact on how people view you. You see where I'm coming from? If you turn on the local news, everybody on the local news talks like they come from Mississippi until the camera turns on, and then it goes standard English. You see what I mean? I want to have a little exercise. I need a volunteer. Thank you. Come on up. Yeah, come on up. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce ourselves, okay? Hi, I'm Trevor Smith.
Hi, I'm David McInnes.
Nice to meet you. We shouldn't have shaken hands, but I forgot about that too. All right, let's try it again. Hi, I'm Trevor Smith.
Hi, I'm David McInnes.
Okay, what did he do right? I'm sorry, what's that? He stood up straight, exactly. Right? What else did he do right? He looked me in the eye, right? Eye contact. He also used his first and his last name, right? Because again, when you're talking to somebody and you're introducing yourself for the first time, doesn't do a whole lot of good unless they know your last name as well, right? Obviously, we're social distancing. I forgot about that too. But he shook my hand properly, right? He didn't give me the, Hulk Hogan grip of death, right? Breaking my metatarsals. But at the same time, he didn't, loose dead fish, because neither way is a good way to shake hands. And ladies, I'm just going to let you know, right? When you shake hands in a professional context, just do it normal like a guy, right? Don't, you're not a Southern Belle. He's not going to kiss your hand, right? Well, let me show you how a lot of women shake hands. Hi, how you doing? Right? I know it's lovely, but that's not how professionals shake hands, right? Yeah, you can sit down. Good job, good job. When a student comes to me, frequently, and I know we're all learning here, it's all good, but when a student comes to me and says, Dr. Smith, can I talk about my grade, or can I ask you a question or something like that, the first thing I ask is, what's your name? Right? The first thing I need to ask is, what's your name? Chances are, if I don't know you. Now, if I say, what's your name? And he says, my name is David, what's the next question I'm going to have to ask? What's your last name? So you need to already know when you need to give your first and last name, right? Because again, that tells the person that you're talking to what your professional level is. Because as a college graduate who has their act together, you need to be able to give your first and last name, and you need to speak it clearly. You get where I'm coming from? Don't mumble your name, right? When you fill out your name on exams, when you fill out your name on proper forms, when you write your name down, and we're using standard English, you use your real first name and your real last name, right? Your name is David. It is not Dave, right? Your name is Jonathan. It is not John, right? Or Jon. Everybody named John wants to be cool now and take the H out, right? What you need to do is understand the short version of your name is like a nickname. The professional version of your name is the real name. You get what I'm saying? Don't put your middle name on a form because you see, if I get a test and it says John Smith, and I look up there and I don't have a John Smith, that guy might have been using his middle name, right? Well, that doesn't do me any good, does it? So all of these things play a big role in moving forward. So I try to take this little time when we talk about the divergence of the language to talk about language itself, right? So everybody's gonna up their game whenever it comes to use of language, the way they present themselves, etc. Right? Does that really matter? I mean, I like to think, I'll talk however I want and the world just has to deal with it. Does that make a difference though? Why do employers not like that attitude? Why do employers like people who say, I'm going to adjust to what's expected of me? Yeah, it means that you can adjust to anything. It means you can follow rules. It means you can follow instructions. It means that you're a team player, right? If you're expected to show up looking professional, well, your ability to follow orders is a big part of what I'm going to hire you for. You see what I mean? So take that seriously and let's move on. Okay. Well, what we have now is a decrease in central power, a decrease in central authority. We see the Carolingian Renaissance come to a dead end as these areas have now fallen apart and are now once again ruled by warlords and noblemen and people like that. And a new group of players is going to enter the picture. A new group of players emerge. They're a group of people in Northern Europe that we could call the Norsemen, the Scandinavians, but of course they're best known as the what? Vikings, exactly. They're best known as the Vikings. Now, if I were to say, what's it like in Northern Europe? What's the first thing that probably comes to mind? Cold. It's cold in Northern Europe. Long, dark, cold winters are followed by very short, mild summers. That's Northern Europe. It's a rough place to live if you're Jimmy Buffett, okay? And humans adapt to their physical environment. You can look at the way a culture operates, and you can know an awful lot about how they're going to be by checking out the world that they're actually living in. And in a place where it is so cold, and by the way, it's also rocky there too, lots of mountains, not a lot of good soil, we know that these people aren't going to be farmers. Not much. They do a little bit, but that's not really how they survive. These people live off the water. There's inlets and ports and natural peninsulas and plenty of places where you can get out on the sea. Not a lot of places where you can farm. Much like Greece, only Greece is to the south and it isn't cold in Greece at all. So how do people adjust to this? Well, first of all, you're going to work your butt off. This is a hard existence. Plain and simple, it is hard to survive here, even in the best of times. You had better work from morning to night, every day. You cannot be lazy or incompetent and survive as a Viking. You just can't. Much of what they do during that brief, mild summer is preparing for the long, cold winter. Because there's going to be several months where the only food you have is food that you had gathered before the winter set in. So they're not lazy, not even a little bit. They are also going to develop a culture that is very, very communal in nature. They cooperate with each other. They lean on each other. They help each other out. This is not an every man for itself society, for himself. It just doesn't work that way. If we're every man for himself, we're all going to die. They don't even live in individual houses. They live in what are called row houses or whatever you want to, long houses, that's what it's called. And they're big, gigantic, where, 100 yards long, where there's just a whole, hundreds of them will all cram in there during the winter. Because that way we can all stay together and we can all keep warm together and we can all help each other out. And I'm sure it smelled great in there. Also, physically, humans actually adapt to their environment as well. Populations that live near the equator tend to be smaller than average, a little shorter, a little thinner. And that's because shorter, thinner people give off heat better. You can handle the hot a lot better when you're smaller. And so naturally, the people that kind of end up surviving are going to be the ones that are a little better at that. And so that's going to be kind of how their bodies develop. Where it's particularly cold, it's the opposite. You need to be bigger, taller, beefier in order to handle that cold weather. So over many generations, the Scandinavians just became big people. A good 4 to 6 inches taller on average than their European counterparts, and probably at least 30 to 50 pounds more in terms of weight. So these are big, strong, hardworking people that cooperate together. And when the central governments that had been building during those Middle Ages suddenly went south again, these Vikings start interacting with the rest of Europe. And they're bigger, they're stronger, they're tougher, they work together. I think we can figure out what kind of interacting they're going to do, right? Now, to be fair, they did a lot of trading, they did a lot of peaceful interaction as well. It's just that they definitely had the capability of taking what they want when they wanted it. And so Viking raids and Viking attacks became kind of a normal thing by the 9th century. One example of how skilled these people were is their engineering. They were brilliant naval engineers. We all know what a Viking ship looks like. Here's a real one up top and a reproduction down below. This looks simple, but it is in fact genius. It's in fact genius. It can handle the roughest waves the North Sea can throw at you. And the North Sea is a rough place. The North Sea is a place where there's big waves and storms. It's bitter cold. It's very stable. It only draws about 2 feet. One simple mast in the middle. And so if the conditions are right, we can just raise it and let the sail blow us along. But if the conditions are wrong, we drop the mast, and the big Viking men just row to their destination. They got very good at navigating either by the stars, but often by seabirds. If you don't have stars to navigate, you can use the birds. Follow the birds, you're going to find the land. So that was kind of cool too. But these boats look simple, but they're just remarkably stable, remarkably efficient and effective. They can go across the sea and then go up a shallow European river, of which there are many. And if you see these guys coming up from that river and your village is right over there, you're about to have a very bad day. So they come in, they burn the village, they take what they want, they rape the horses and ride off on the women and go to the next village and do the same thing. The people are in trouble. Now again, the Vikings did interact peacefully. It's just that sometimes they didn't. And then, of course, when the Vikings really don't want to play nice, we end up with Fran Tarkenton or Adrian Peterson back when he was with them. Then it's time to start praying and send the saints in, right? Anyway, by the 10th century, the Vikings have moved all throughout Central and Western Europe using its vast river network. They actually founded the city of Kiev, which is in present-day Ukraine, south of Russia, thousands of miles away from Scandinavia. At one point, a Viking, I guess we would say, army crossed the Black Sea with the intention of conquering Constantinople itself. And when they showed up and realized, no, we can't take this city, it's too big, they actually joined the Byzantine army. And so the Byzantine army had a bunch of Vikings fighting with it for a while, as I understand. But their influence can be seen everywhere. They did a real number on England. They were very violent in England, and they would just raid England all the time, but also northern France, etc. So what happens when you look and you realize these guys are coming and we can't stop them and they seem to keep beating us up? Well, if you're the Saints, I guess you can hire a new coach, right? But I think Peyton's doing all right. If you're a peasant living in the 9th century, well, you turn to the guy that can help you. You turn to the local warlord. You turn to the local nobleman and say, you've got an army and you've got resources and I need help. These guys are destroying our villages. And the local warlord is more than happy to help you. He says, yes, of course. You need my protection, and I am going to give you my protection. And you're going to give me something in return, aren't you? And what do you think that local warlord is going to want in return? Everything. All of it. You're going to give me your land. You're going to give me your wealth. You're going to give me your freedom. I am going to own you just like I own the land. We are going to create a new version of slavery that we call serfdom. And you will become a serf. And if you give me everything, my army will protect you from those pesky Vikings. And from this, we see a new political, social, and economic system emerge that we call feudalism. And it fills that power vacuum after the collapse of the Carolingian Renaissance. But we're not going to talk about feudalism today because we're pretty much out of time. So we're going to start about that on Wednesday. I'll talk more about the exam, right? Any questions before I go? All right, y'all, take care. Oh, I won't be in my office this afternoon. I've got to leave. Okay, so if anybody needs to see me, now's the time.